Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of V Next. I am your host, Mike Walker, and today we're going to dive into the research area a bit. We're going to talk to a partner at Microsoft Research. He's going to talk about his very long tenure at Microsoft and some of his research projects, what keeps him up at night, his career journey to get to where he's at, and we're going to talk about some of the cool stuff he's doing. And so it's going to be a really fun episode. And for those that are looking for either careers in a R&D type of role or just curious, Ranveer, he is a super smart guy, and I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. Now, like with all episodes, all the show notes and links will be found on vnextpod.com. That's vnextpod.com. All right, guys, let's get into it. Ranveer, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, great to be here, Mike. Hi.
Yeah, so, this is something we've been wanting to do for a while because you are working on some really cool stuff over in Microsoft Research. And, for those that don't know you, it'd be good to maybe get a little background about who you are and your role within Microsoft.
Yeah, this is my 16th year at Microsoft. I'm a PhD in computer science from Cornell. I joined Microsoft in 2005. That was in Microsoft Research. I did research in different areas of computer science. It started with networking. That was my background. Did a lot of work on one concept that I was working on then was called TV Whitespaces. That is, imagine if your Wi-Fi could go several miles. And the way we did that was taking a Wi-Fi signal and putting them in empty TV channels. So this was one of the work I did back in 2005. I worked a lot with product teams. I transferred a lot of my research in Windows and Surface. And for the Xbox One, if you're using an Xbox One, I designed the wireless controller protocol. And then in 2015, I started the FarmBeats research. This was on digital agriculture. The question that we asked was, how do you feed the growing population of the world? And as part of that, the FarmBeats was one of the other pieces of work which got a lot of visibility. As part of that effort, I moved into the product side in 2018. I moved over to Azure Global. We shipped a product called Azure FarmBeats. This was announced at Ignite. We did several partnerships with Land Lakes, with many other companies. And then I've moved back in Microsoft Research from Azure. And now in my current role, I'm leading a new initiative called Research for Industry, which is bringing in my computer science research and research in other areas such as in physics, in material sciences, in chemistry, in agriculture, in food, and bringing all of that to different industries. And this is an initiative across Azure, across Microsoft Research, where we are trying to envision what the data-driven future of every industry is going to look like. In addition to that, I also lead networking research at Microsoft. I also serve as the CTO for agriculture and food at Microsoft.
Wow. There's just a few things that you're doing, right? And what's really interesting and what's fascinating me about your role, Ranveer, is that it goes across a very wide spectrum from gaming to networking communications protocols to an industry vertical like agriculture. And so I guess
Mhm.
for someone like you, how do you straddle these really far extended topics? How do you keep it all straight?
That's a good question, Mike. And because my training is in computer science, and that too, my PhD was in networking. But what I realized is that part of it, you have to always keep learning. This is one thing I really like is to learn a lot and learn fast. But the other part is to partner with the right people. That is, you have to be willing to partner with the experts. And as you know, with agriculture, I met farmers a lot. I did go volunteer on farms, and I started partnering with them. When we were doing farm beats, I was like, well, you know what? I'm not the agriculture specialist. I did spend a lot of time growing up in India, close to farms, but that's not my specialty. I'm a computer scientist. But then I would work with people who are agriculture specialists, and then see how can computer science, all these techniques with artificial intelligence, with networking, with systems, with hardware, how can I improve the lives of a farmer? Similarly, when we're working on supply chain, I tap into your expertise. You know a lot in this area. But where I'm coming in is how can I bring my expertise in computer science, in networking, in systems, in AI, and machine learning to this new industry? So I think there are two key answers to your question. One is that yeah, if someone in the audience is looking for motivation or just wants to be inspired, yeah, it's possible to learn. You just keep reading a lot and learning a lot and do get as much hands-on experience. But then the other part is you won't be the expert as someone who's doing that full time and has been doing it for a long period of time, for which partnerships is key. It is only so much that you can learn. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. And I think, even outside of your own personal experience, I think this is something that, innovators, even if you're in a high tech firm, if you're in a bank, or if you're in an agriculture firm, or wherever you may be, that, you don't know where that next innovation is going to happen. And you have to keep an open mind, and you have to be humble enough to know that you don't have all the answers, but the most important thing that what you're saying is it's not about knowing the answer necessarily, but it's about how to find that answer. And I
Yeah.
think that is a unique skill set. And it's something where you have to be comfortable with that level of risk as well, because it is a little scary sometimes going into the unknown and not knowing what, the outcome's going to be. So it really
Right.
is this entrepreneurial risk taker type of mentality that you have to have. Am I getting
Yeah.
close here?
No, you are exactly to your point, Mike, right? That is you have to you have to realize that you might not know the answer and you don't know the answer. If you have to be honest about it. And so the other thing that helped, in addition to the two things I mentioned about learning and partnership, is to find a mentor who
Right.
knows that space really well. And like for example, when I was doing agriculture with Farm Beats, I picked two people who were very much senior in the industry. They're not from Microsoft. One person was at USDA, another person was is a professor at University of California, Davis. So these were when you're picking a problem, you want to go find out from people who are the experts who've been there for a while to make sure that the problem you're going after is relevant. So that's again another thing that helped me.
No, I think that makes a ton of sense. And, I think, that applies to a lot of people. And that's in this digital world that we are now living in, it's super critical that we start to think in that way, because most of the industry constructs that we've created over the past 50, 60 years are starting to kind of blur together a bit, right? You've got, companies like Starbucks that is, traditionally, a coffee company. However, they're the number one mobile payments provider in North America. So they're also a bank, right?
Yeah.
So, you look at this and you're like, well, you know, the being comfortable just within one industry isn't
Yeah.
going to take you where you necessarily need to be.
Yeah, and also every industry is so cross-cutting now. Like if you look at supply chain, it cuts across everything. Same with retailers. And just again going back to the agriculture example, right? When I was there, agriculture is about farming, production agriculture. It involves finance because banks are giving loans. It involves supply chain because well, the farmers are shipping the food. It involves mining
Yep.
because well, you're mining for fertilizer. It involves energy because biofuels are key, and agriculture, of course, farmers they are consumers of energy as well. Sustainability again, it cuts across all industries. Same with you could flip it around and say, well, finance, financial services is an industry, but it cuts across all industries. It cuts across retail, it cuts across energy, everything. So these boundaries, as you said, are getting blurred and getting more blurred. It's not about an expert in one could needs to be an expert in everything,
Right.
or they could be their expertise would be beneficial to all industries.
Yeah, totally. And so that was one big area that I wanted to talk to you about, was around kind of your spectrum of experience. Now, another aspect that people are probably wondering and maybe have a false expectation of as well is whenever they hear about a research department or an R&D department, they think, oh, well, this is just, a science experiment. This is, 10, 20, 30 years out. But that's not what I'm hearing from you. I'm hearing that, in your role, at least in your role in Microsoft Research, and I would suspect in other roles as well, is it's not solely focused on that long range experimental crystal ball land stuff, but this is real stuff for here and the now. Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so when we think of research, we think of it in two horizons. That is, one is more shorter term and the other is more longer term. And the shorter term are things that we kind of know that they should work. If we have an intuition, we know enough things to know that this could potentially work. And then there is a longer term work, which is, if those get solved, they would really transform the industry in a big way. But they are big bets. There's a much, much higher likelihood of failure. And we do both at Microsoft Research. When we think of this long term problem of what is it that we are trying to achieve, we divide them. We figure out what is the right way to do it. If it is more shorter term, if shorter term here would be 3 to 5 year horizon, we try to do it in house with help from experts from outside. But the center of gravity of that is in house. But on the other hand, if it is more longer term, and we invest in those as well, and there's some projects that we're doing with universities that fall in that category. So when it comes to that, we still involved, but then the center of gravity of that is at the university. This is when we are working, for example, we are working with Cornell, or we're working with Georgia Tech or any other university. We then the center of gravity is there. We work with them. They apply for grants. We give them our technology so that when they're doing this kind of research, when they're thinking of what the future is of that industry, they are using some of the tools that we are building. But a lot of this research is being done there. While we do host their interns here, they do that work, they take it back to universities, but we heavily rely on researchers in universities when we are taking the bets that are even longer term. But even there's the others that are in the 3 to 5 year horizon, or even sooner. Those are the ones that we do here at Microsoft as well. In some cases, you'll find there are some other bets that we are doing, which is further than 5 years. Like if you look at quantum, if you look at some of the work on synthetic biology, there are things that we're doing here. They are much longer term, but these are very strategic in terms of where we want to be. Still, we partner with universities on those initiatives as well, but we have a significant amount of investment within Microsoft Research.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is that it isn't a cut and dry thing. That this is you look at this more as like an innovation portfolio where there's going to be certain investments that happen more near term for specific types of reasons and return and customer engagement and product evolution, etc. And then there's going to be
Right.
more longer term bets, right? Where it is that it may be a moonshot. It may be, hey,
Yeah.
this might not pan out, but we have
Right.
to do this research.
Right, exactly. And we have, exactly to your point, we have that, but we also keep a view, and this is where we work together on defining what that future is for every industry.
Yep.
We have a vision of what we believe is that data-driven future of the industry. When you think of, be it any industry we pick, as you know, Mike, we discussed this is the vision that we want to go after, for which you don't need a research degree for that, right? You need people like yourself, like others who are experts in this space with customers as well. We'll talk to them and we'll define this is the future that we'll get to. It
Right.
might be longer term, but then how do we get there is then we come up with a portfolio saying this is what we need to do in order to get to that vision of the future. And then we combine, we do some in-house, some with partners, some with academia, some with research organizations, and then we get there. And we need to do that. This is the world's future. We all have to play a role in getting there. Some of it includes engineering, includes marketing, includes academics, includes everyone. And everyone has a role to play. And we all need to work together. You can't be doing research in isolation.
And for someone
Yeah.
that's curious, because I hear this a lot because I deal with lots of innovation teams, with our customers as an example. So someone that might be in a healthcare company that's on an innovation team, might say, well, this sounds really cool. Maybe we should, do something, very similar to what Microsoft's doing about, looking at this as a portfolio and not making bets just on one area of the continuum versus another area of the continuum, because that pendulum can swing hard one way or another. We see that
Yeah.
often, right? So I guess what would your day in the life look
Mhm.
like? What does an example of that look like for you and what you do? Because I think that'd be super fascinating for people to hear.
Right. So, yeah, so in my own life, now it has changed a bit. I used to be much more hands-on.
Right.
But in right now, a lot of uh, my day-to-day life is different from a regular academic or a regular researcher. I do spend a lot of time reading the latest that's happening in the industry, reading analyst reports, reading like staying up to date with multiple industries and what's happening, what are our customers thinking, where are they headed right now, where is research going. So a significant part of the day is also looking at research breakthroughs that are coming out, being published in Nature, being sent to by friends of mine in academia, in research, in VC firms as well, where we do host these sessions with startups where we get to know where is everyone. And we also need to map out where do we sit within that ecosystem. When we hear what the future is, what is our role in research? Where is it that what we do is differentiated? What is it that we can do that is significantly moving the needle for that industry? So a lot of my time is thinking about that. And so part of my time is thinking about where the world's headed. What is it that we need to be doing to get there?
Okay.
And there are some things that we ask in the process, right? Like one of the principles I have when deciding to prioritize is if there is another team that can do it, if there is a partner or a startup that can do it, I let them do it. It's not a thing that I want to be investing our time on. We want to go after something which is differentiated, that is risky enough that if it succeeds, it's going to significantly move the needle for that particular industry. So that again is the way we prioritize. But as I said, a lot of my time is thinking about where the industry is headed, where the research is headed, and the intersection of that. Because a lot of the researchers, if you read papers in Nature, papers in any of the academic journals, they are not talking about industry.
Right.
They are talking about, for example, a research paper will talk about how they came up with the next breakthrough in cryptography, how they came up with making the network faster, how they improved the battery life. Well, these are all components of what you would need to bring all of them together if you have to drive disruption for the industry. Like the analogy I make is, in academic departments, you have a department within computer science, you have a department for programming languages, someone doing security, someone doing AI, someone doing networking systems, hardware. In When you think of industry, you have to bring all of them together and much more. That is, you have to bring the robotics guy, the networking guy, the
Yep.
systems guy, the hardware guy, security guy, all of them to be thinking together about what the future is for the industry. So this kind of mapping of the latest breakthroughs in research to where the industry is headed is something that we are looking to do as part of research for industry. So, and of course, working with and this is why I tell people that you have to. It's not just research as in someone a scientist thinking blue sky stuff. It's about a lot of it is also mapping that blue sky both in academia with where the industry is headed.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And, this is, super fascinating because, we talked about, kind of the continuum, the innovation continuum, and, how, risk adverse or how much risk you want to take. And now we're talking about specific industry and creating a strategy around that and bringing together subject matter experts to create that point of view or POV of the future. And it would be good to double click on that a little bit and get specifically how do you do that? How do you bring together all these diverse people that have various different concerns, and rightfully so, right? Some are thinking very, very short term, some are thinking midterm, a lot probably are not thinking super long term, but they're thinking of things like we got a ton of legacy, we've got poor standards, we got poor data, and in those environments it's hard to innovate. So for you, when you go into these worlds, and maybe agriculture is a great example of this given the complexities there, but how do you bring people together to create those industry point of views for the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years?
Right, right. And this is a challenge, right? Especially when we are coming from Microsoft, when we are not the industry experts.
Right.
So how do you go and create a point of view for the industry is something that we are continuing to work on this. I won't say that we have a solution for that, but I think there you need to work with people and listen to people who are passionate about changing that industry. This could be within the company, this could be outside, this could be someone in a startup, this could be someone in one of the other firms. We need to be open and learn and align ourselves to a vision that either we believe in, or vision where it could be a combination of your vision plus the vision of someone else. And that, if you combine them, is what can help get you there. And we, as you know, within Microsoft, we have hired a few subject matter experts. We have some experts. A lot of times, these experts are, if they're not here, they're in academia. These are people who have been working in that space for a long time. Or it could be in some of the companies that we work with very closely. They are the experts. But as you said, a lot of times when you talk to them, their view of what can be done is limited by what exists.
Yeah.
They are limited by this is the data we have, and so this is what we can do. I think that's where coming in and opening that mindset, and that I had to do with agriculture quite a lot.
Right.
Just to give an example, when I talk to farmers and when I talk to agricultural companies, initially they were like, this is what we can do, this is what we do right now. And then I opened up the conversation saying, well, what if I got you this additional data? And a lot of times, I think that the challenge is what could you do if you get that additional data stream? Because now, with all the advances that are happening in communication and edge compute with the Internet of Things, you could start getting large amounts of data that you did not get before. Like, for example, from a farm, from an oil rig, from smart cities, you could then supplement whatever people are doing now with this new vision of large amounts of data. And then the key then is if you can start combining these different data streams, not just because when a lot of time when people talk of data and AI, they talk about, hey, I get this data stream and I will do artificial intelligence on top of it. Well, what if you get multiple data streams, many new additional data streams, and you do artificial intelligence on top? You could unlock scenarios that just didn't exist before. Just to give you an example, right, one of the things we did in FarmBeats was for agriculture. The question was, suppose you have to build an accurate soil map, right? So the question was, what is the soil moisture 6 inches below the soil throughout the farm? How would you go about building such a map? Well, people thought that, well, if you have to build an accurate map, you would need a sensor every 10 meters, and it's super expensive. You just can't do it. The way we solved that problem was we said, you know what, you could put sensors in the ground, connect them to the internet using TV Whitespaces or space communication, and using edge compute, you could get data from drones or satellites. You could combine these using AI to start interpolating data. So with very few sensors in the farm, you could start building very accurate soil moisture, soil nutrient, soil pH maps. Once you show it to the grower, they are like, hey, once you get all of this data, I can improve yield. I can reduce my costs because I would use less of my inputs, less water, less pesticide. I can also be more sustainable. I can practice more sustainable agriculture. And it's the same. If you look at these principles, applies to every industry. If you look at a warehouse, if you start getting large amounts of data from the warehouse, from every point in the warehouse, from every package that's there, every robotic system that's there across time, you can use it to improve efficiencies. You can plan better. You know what's where, you know the freshness of everything over there. You can plan better, you can reduce costs. You can also be more sustainable because, well, you won't be wasting energy, you'll be getting things on time, you won't be going your trucks won't be going without less load. So all of those problems could be addressed if you start getting additional data. But then again, these problems comes by talking to the experts, like people who know the industry, and then you bring in this computer science view saying, you know what, these are some of the latest advances that are happening. This is what you can do with DNA in the future. This is what you can do with say, quantum compute, with AI. And these are the problems that exist, and then marry them together to envision the future of the industry.
So I think you're onto something here, and what you're onto and what you're describing, which I think is fascinating, which is you're not saying you're trying to create the point of view for the future and what a specific industry will look like, but rather trying to get enough information to be able to empathize with customers and their challenges, the concerns, the constraints, but also provide another vital element to the equation, which is the inspiration. it's to light the fire in that industry and say, hey, look, we're not the experts. We've got some ideas. And we're going to experiment. We're going to help you experiment, and maybe we'll do stuff on our own and incubate that for you to some degree. But really, it's about fostering these industries, fostering that innovation within these industries to then let them control their own destiny and create the POV for their industry. But we're going to do just enough so we don't, one, do damage,
Yeah.
two, that we're credible in that market and we can actually help them, but three, we can actually provide some real material assistance in helping them evolve their industry because we understand their industry a bit better. And for that particular case, you don't necessarily have to be the expert. It's we understand the guardrails, we understand what you can and can't do, and the laws and all that great stuff. Am I understanding that right?
No, that's completely right, Mike. You're phrasing exactly the way we've structured it. It's all about learning enough of the industry or being able to talk credibly to our partners and helping them envision with all the data, with all the tools, with the latest in technology, how they can benefit from all of these technology disruptions that are happening to envision the future of that industry. We don't want them to be disrupted. We want our customers, our partners to be disrupting. And we want to provide the right tools so that they can disrupt the world, not get disrupted themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and speaking of that, I mean, so what are some of the things that at least that you can share? Because I know there's obviously some sensitivity around some things, but it would be good to share maybe some examples of some of the things that you're working on where it kind of highlights some of these characteristics.
Yeah, I would love to talk about a few of those projects, Mike. One of them is I mentioned a little bit about TV Whitespaces. This is imagine if your Wi-Fi can go several miles, right? Now, as soon as you exit your house, your Wi-Fi disappears. And the way we did that was we took a Wi-Fi signal and put them in empty TV channels. This is over-the-air TV, the TV you watch using antennas. When you browse through channels, on certain channels you get a transmission. On the other channels, all you get is a white noise, nothing coming there. The technology we had built was a way to take a Wi-Fi signal and put them in a noisy TV channel in a way that doesn't interfere with your TV reception in an adjacent channel. So you could be watching channel 7 at home. On channel 8, we could be sending Wi-Fi signals.
So this
And
is like the old school TVs where you used to have the dial and every other channel was static, right? The what was it,
exactly.
VHF,
Yeah,
UHF?
VHF and UHF TV channels,
Yeah,
exactly.
okay.
The benefit is that compared to Wi-Fi, in UHF TV channels, your signals will go 4 times farther. In VHF, they go 12 times farther, and this is in free space. Once you put them through trees, crops, canopies, buildings, your signals just keep going through. So that's one of the benefits. And we built this. The FCC chairman was here back in 2010. This was approved for legal use. Since then, we've gone out, connected high schools, hospitals, dispensaries, and so on to the internet using this tech. One of the things that we started with agriculture. Now we are doing this in other industries as well. We realized that, well, you can use it not only to connect people, you can use it to connect things. In particular, in places that are remote. If you think of a warehouse that is remote, or if you're thinking of a manufacturing plant that is away from the cities, because the TV towers are in cities. Outside the city, most of these channels are just white noise. The more noisy channels there are, the more capacity there is. Even if there are 20 TV channels that are free, we are talking of over 400 megabits per second of capacity in remote areas, using which you can start getting data that didn't exist before, so that you couldn't get access to before. So this is one of the innovations. Building on that, one of the new things we've done, which we haven't talked about much, but we will be writing a paper on it, is a new IoT radio. Imagine a narrow band radio operating in the TV spectrum that can go really long distances. And it is a tri-band radio. It can go across multiple bands, and it can transmit data, very low power device, low cost device that can transmit data over long distances. We had worked with the FCC, we had submitted comments to them, and the FCC recently passed rulings. This was in end of October, where these devices, this IoT operation in the TV white spaces is now authorized by the FCC. So this is one of the technologies that we worked on. Another technology that we worked on is called Space Eye, which is how do you see through the clouds in satellite imagery? Satellite imagery is useful for many industries, for energy, for retail, for financial services. It's used in the government, public sector. It's used in many places. People look at Earth observation
Now,
data.
Ranveer, this is sounding a bit suspect. This sounds like a James Bond movie to me. Uh,
Uh-huh. Yeah, it is kind of that, right? So because if you look at because in satellite data, once it's cloudy, you really can't see what's happening below the clouds in satellite imagery. And we hear in news reports where people didn't know what was happening in a certain region because it was cloudy.
right.
So this is where this work was actually done by most of the work was done by one of my interns from MIT. He came and he built this really cool system called SpaceEye, where we are combining data from multiple satellites. That is, there's another satellite that has radar in it, and we combine that with another satellite that has these multispectral cameras in it. And you combine them using artificial intelligence, a brand new thing he came up with. He and another person in my team, Peter, where you can reconstruct what's happening below the clouds with a high level of accuracy. So now you're not limited by seeing where it is. Every day you'll be getting a new clean image of what's happening below the clouds. We did this for a farm where you could see when the farmer was irrigating, when they planted, all that stuff on a daily basis. We did this for the port of Seattle, where you could see ships coming and going, even though it was cloudy. This last summer was cloudy in Seattle. We could see the construction site coming up. So this is what AI and data can do in the future. These are just two examples, but there are many of these examples of technology, the public ones that I could talk about. And we are building this in a way where it can be used for industry. These are tools, but we are customizing these tools that we are building so that it can be used for different industries.
Yeah, I love the Space Eye example because one, it just has a cool name. But two, it's leveraging all these technologies and the coordination of all this different data. And I know it's not a deep fake, but you could use that as an analogy that it's like you're building a deep fake underneath the clouds. You're reconstructing, you're saying, hey, this is highly probable it'll be this way. And so maybe I'm just oversimplifying things in my own brain, or I have an overactive imagination. But it's super cool, and all the different applications you can use for this. From you had mentioned farming, it could be construction. We've got
Yeah,
cities all over around the world building stuff. Weather's not going to be perfect all the time. And
right,
so you could see how that could be used for things like that, but also modeling. And
right.
so,
That's
uh,
a great idea. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that and even this was one. Even the TV Whitespace is one of connectivity. Would love to hear from you as to what are the different scenarios you see this connectivity benefiting. That is, if you could start providing internet access to remote areas, remote as in even in cities, you could use it that too.
totally.
What are the scenarios that you could enable, like connecting forests for forest fires to like supply chain to if you think of retail from retail stores or warehouses, right?
And what I think about also is the social impact. So, we've got this huge digital divide that is not only here in the United States, but, all around the world. And what this provides is it provides a ubiquitous way of getting access, internet access. Some things that we, as Microsoft, sometimes we can take for granted that, we
Right.
have access and we've got a lot of it. But there are a lot of communities, a lot of minority communities that just don't have access to these same level of services. And for
Yeah.
a fairly low cost for a city, they could offer municipal Wi-Fi, right?
Right,
That would be
right.
huge, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And you couple that with smart city infrastructure.
right,
You've got cities like Seattle and San Francisco that have talked about city Wi-Fi, this and that. But now we can actually talk about Wi-Fi as a service that's provided to the citizens as well, right?
right,
As a stretch, as a human right to have. And so I think a lot about solving that problem as well, because I think it's a very real problem. I think it's a
right.
problem that we can uniquely solve with this type of technology and do a lot of good, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so I think that's an area. And early in my career, I remember dealing with a lot of these protocol standards and dealing with things like hills and line of sight and being able to get signals in places. And this solves a lot of those problems. Again, simple things that we don't think about, even within a dense city with a great communications infrastructure, that this
right,
solves because the spectrum is so low that it can penetrate through everything, right? And
right.
so that's what's really cool about it. And
Yeah,
again,
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
it's ubiquitous,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head here, especially over the last year with COVID. We realized how important connectivity is, and this divide is so real and getting worse, and how it's even more urgent for us to bridge the divide of getting people connected. This kind of we need to make sure that they're not just some privileged people who are connected. And in fact, I was just writing a paper over the last few months on this, and one of the things I found out was how the latest in the digital divide, there more than 40% of the world doesn't have internet connectivity. And if you think of it, that's like close to 3 billion people. And how do you get them to the internet is something that we keep thinking about. One, of course, is TV Whitespaces is one tech. There is low cost cellular that we're looking at is another tech. Space is another work that we're doing on right now. We just recently published a paper on a new kind of a ground station architecture, low cost ground stations that can again make space communications easier. But that's again, I think we all need to work on this, because if we could, one of the things that would benefit every industry is if more people come online, more people can get benefit of all the digital services that are being built.
Now, another connectivity service that that I was disappointed that hasn't gone any further than some initial pilots that had occurred. I mean, this has been 15 years ago, so this tech is nowhere near bleeding edge, just like with the tech that we're talking about here. But this was providing connectivity over the power lines. And so all the way back, I was working and partnering with a electric utility company that was piloting this in a major city to be able to deliver this. Now, at the time, it just wasn't cost effective, but that was at the time. But it'd be also interesting is if you could imagine, all you have to do is when you plug in a device, because every device needs power. So if you plug in a TV, you plug in a toaster, you plug in your computer, you plug in, whatever it is, everything lights up. It's got an IP address. It's there on the network, right? And so I think at the end of the day, just like with all innovation, it's not just going to be one technology. It's going to be a combination of technologies for particular situations that we think will be beneficial.
Yeah, and I love the vision that you're painting here, because you could also use this power line to connect everything to the internet, just with, as you said, plugging in power. You could also use, like in the future, who knows, it could all be wireless charging. Your power line is there, but you have enough coils and for inductive charging, which just charges like wherever you are. It's just getting charged. It's getting the energy, getting the internet, because energy is the other constraint, right? And we all saw this last week in Texas and how vulnerable our grid is. But this is again with energy and internet. I agree. The future is all about combining these different other methods that exist and inventing new ones around the process. But because once these disruptions happen, they are going to affect all industries. Every industry is going to be affected in a positive way.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally. And I'm also excited about the idea and the notion, and this has been tested in small scale, and so we'll see if it's realistic on a broader scale, but actually over the air energy. And so
Yeah.
not just, a conductive coil, but actually transmitting electricity via the
RF
air.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's some very innovative work happening in that space using radio frequencies as well. Both, so coil-based, of course, there's inductive charging or any of those methods, or resonant-based, or you could be using RF-based methods of charging as well. So there are very interesting innovations happening. Who knows, maybe in the future for your TV, you wouldn't need a cord at the back. Like in my office right now, I have so many wires. Do I need them? And some of the innovations again being driven by the innovations in the EV charging space, where you want these EVs to be wirelessly charged. Some of that could carry over everywhere else in other places, and that could lead to a very interesting future.
Oh, totally. And listen, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours about this stuff because obviously this is a passion area for both of us. I think what would be good to understand from you as well is being a practitioner, an innovator. You've done a lot of really great stuff. What are some things that have surprised you in your career that maybe wasn't expected as an outcome whenever you've it could be something current, like the things that we have just talked about with agriculture and space eye and all that, or it could be something, pulled from your past as well. But it'd be good to
Right.
kind of understand that perspective of something that was like a complete kind of out of left field. You're like, oh wow, I can't believe that happened.
Yeah, and so part of it is okay. In my own research, there have been times when I have been skeptical of it and still being going off. I've been going after it, and uh, I've had pleasant surprises when we are doing that, and that's for multiple things, like Space Eye being one of them, where I don't think initially I believed that we would get the results that we did, and now we're getting even better. We are continuing to push the boundaries of it. But on the other hand, uh, taking a slightly level higher beyond technology, if I just look at some of the disruptions that are happening in like food in the food space, is something I'm super impressed with, super excited about. When I had started working on Farm Beats, this was something which I hadn't expected would take off so quickly. But all the work that's happening with alternative proteins, plant-based proteins, the work that's happening with Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat and other companies that are driving this disruption. I think that is something which, uh, like technology wise, I knew it could be done. I didn't expect that it would catch up so quickly.
Right.
And that is something that I've been very, yeah, as in this is one of the new disruptions, and I'm very bullish on it. I think the future is going to be even more and more. That is, for example, if I think of the future of food, what we eat, is going to be more like medicine. It's like it's going to be preventive medicine. You are going to eat what's right for you,
Right.
precision nutrition, right? And everyone's going to go there. And a lot of it will be driven by the innovations that are happening in the biotech space and synthetic biology and the impact of that. Because I guess the reason I didn't expect it to take off so quickly was also because of the regulatory aspect of it. But that is also an indicator of many other industries which are regulated as well, where like energy is regulated, connectivity. You should like there are opportunities, there are things that we shouldn't hold ourselves back from just because we believe that there will be regulatory hurdles. If it is good, if it is something people want, uh, the regulations will come about to make it happen.
Yeah. And I think that's an important lesson, right? Because sometimes we get lulled into the illusion that the future and innovation in the future is linear, and it is not. All it takes is one event to change things, and this pandemic has showed us this, right? There was many organizations that were on a particular trajectory, and
Right.
now there, given the pandemic, now there is a whole new set of things that they need to innovate, and they've deprioritized those things that they thought was important. So like if
Yeah.
I'm in keeping along the same lines as food, so if I'm McDonald's or any other food industry, now it's about touchless. How can I create a heightened experience in a sticky experience with my customers, but also being in a touchless world? And
Yeah.
so you've got now McDonald's, you've got a company, a burger joint in California. I forget their name. I apologize in advance. But where you go up to a kiosk, it's a big monitor. It's got facial recognition, so it knows who you are. You've got the mobile app in your pocket that has all your preferences and all that great stuff. And all you need to do is either use your smartphone to communicate with it, or you talk to it. And so completely touchless. I think there's even some gesture stuff that's in it as well.
Yeah.
But that's something that wasn't expected, and that was maybe something that people thought pre-pandemic that we'll put it on the back burner. It's not as important, not a consumer-driven thing. But now, very much so. Like
Yeah.
a lot of the robotic automation and back office in a lot of these companies as well. McDonald's is a great example of this as well, where they can make a Big Mac fully automated, and they've got this in production in Japan right now. Right now, it's a
Yeah.
bit more socially accepted there than it is maybe say here in the U.S. or in Europe, etc. And again, that's another important consideration, which is
Right.
the government in which you're in. And if you think about it and analyze it, the thing that I've learned is there's a culture thing there, but it's really not a culture thing. What it is the government is actually incenting companies to build robotics. And that is a huge drive for the robotics industry. And that's why you see companies like Honda and Toyota actually building elderly care robots along with cars because the government is helping subsidize that research, etc. And so a lot of times we don't take a step back and we don't look at the practicalities of innovation, that it's not as simple as an academic report or a Gartner research report or whatever, right? It's a little bit more complex than that, and we've got to kind of, in some ways, go with the flow. In other ways, we got to be really good at scenario planning and understanding the kind of the what if scenarios and say, well, if scenario A happens, we know which way to go. Scenario B happens, we know which way to go, etc. And
Right.
so that's what I took away from what you said. Am I close?
No, no, that is, and this was a great point that you raised, along with the analogy, right? That is, policy plays such an important role, and we shouldn't ignore something just because the policies are not in place. If we do the right thing, if we enable the vision, if the customers want it, and we make sure that it's not going to cause harm, the government might such policy has, and like food-based regulations is one example. TV Whitespaces was another. That wasn't a legal thing to do. We tried it out, it worked, and the FCC made regulatory changes. The other thing, by the way, when you were mentioning this, Mike, was that that we are talking of different industries. We talked of retail, we talked of food, we talked of logistics. Uh, Underlying that, what this conversation shows is how important our role is. That is, yeah, of course, the experts are the most important, but the fact that a lot of these disruptions are driven with the use of the cloud, with the use of technology.
Yep.
That's We are not building the end solution, but we are building the tools, the enablers
Yep.
for a lot of these disruptions to happen by the experts, by the startups, by these companies. But like, whether you think of robotics, whether you think of the genomics cloud pipeline, whether you think of molecular discovery, anything you pick, our role as technologists, it's humbling to some extent to think that the impact of the work that we are doing as tools, that's we could enable a lot of the partners to be so much more successful if we do the right thing, if we do our innovations in the right domains. We could just drive so much impact by working with these industries. And just to put this point in a little bit more perspective, when I was doing farm beats, I got asked, well, Microsoft doesn't do agriculture. What are you guys doing in the agriculture space? I was giving this keynote at InfoAg. This one of the top tier ag tech conferences, and that is when I was like, the picture I painted was how the work we are doing in cloud, in the Internet of Things, in edge, in AI, how all of this can enable tools for all the people in the ag tech sectors to re-envision, to envision what the future of that industry looks like the things we are talking about, the future of food, the McDonald's scenario you pointed out, or the one in Japan with robots. And that's something which just shows the importance of all the work we're doing, and the level of impact that it can have across different industries.
Oh yeah, totally. And so to also, I think another aspect here is, when you're going through this thought process, who are some of your innovation heroes? So when you think about inspiration, for when you're doing your job, if there was an imaginary picture of someone, Edison or Jobs or whoever on your wall, you know who do you see is, either, it could be a couple, but who is your kind of go-to inspiration for innovation?
I think I look across at multiple people.
Yeah.
It's not just one. Like some people I get, and I've been lucky to have spent time with Bill Gates. He like with in innovation sessions, brainstorming with him, or he blogged about Farm Beats and Gates Notes. I hosted him there, presented it to him. I've been very impressed with his level of thinking, the humility with which he approaches things, knowing well that I might not be the expert, but I'll learn really fast. And that's something which I gathered from him in some of the sessions when I saw him. And I really like the way he's thinking as well, thinking out of the box and thinking on the level of impact, the ambition in with which he thinks that you can transform the world with the work that you do. I think that's something which I really admire, the way he's followed his passion in that space. And of course, the scientists. I think I would at this point there are multiple scientists, and I read about all of them. And like whether you look at Einstein or Newton or even some people in our current generation, the Turing Award winners, I'm always enamored by. I really like reading their stories and the way they came about these inventions. One of the things that is there is, you know what, there is sheer brilliance, there's perseverance, there's also about working on the right problem at the right time. And there is all of that. And the last one, we cannot do much. We just work on the problems that you feel passionate about. But the others is, yeah, you can keep learning and just learning from their experiences. And also the fact that certain things from the time they are invented to the time they actually become real, it could take years.
Yeah.
So the fact that patience is important, and I think that's something else that's a learning just from many of the really impressive scientists that have been there in our generation and before our generation as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Gates is definitely one of those guys that I've looked up to for a number of years, even before I came to Microsoft back in all the way back in 2006. And I was lucky enough to be at the company when he was still here at the company, which was great as well. And what's really impressed me about Bill G is that he it's really the business of innovation. He gets that side of the house really, really well. And so, you could compare, and there's the obvious comparisons that people make in the industry between Jobs and Gates. And I think it's not a good comparison because they were good at innovation. Both of them were really great at innovation, but there were different facets, different aspects of innovation that they were really good at. And so, what I loved about Gates was he was tenacious. He knew that he had to understand the business side really well to make sure that not only did he paint a big picture of what the future looked like, but he was able to land and actually drive that innovation. And so, especially in his second half, when I was able to work with him at Intellectual Ventures and do the lab stuff with him, and the recycling of toilet water into drinkable water, renewable energy with recycling nuclear power waste into power that we can actually use again. It was just fascinating to see kind of how his mind works. And you're absolutely right. It was, hey, I don't have all the answers, but this is a big problem. Let's go and try to solve it. Let's see where we go with this thing. And that's what I loved about Bill G. And just he's also just a great guy trying to do the right thing for the world, which you have to love.
Yeah, in fact, the latest book that he wrote, right, on climate, that's an amazing book. And his vision there, again, it's a hard problem. And he's thinking about all the things, including policy, including business, including science, what needs to happen. And I think that kind of holistic view is needed. And somehow I encourage more and more scientists to be thinking like that. It's not just about the science. Think also in terms of what is the business impact? How will you make it real? How will you take it all the way? Don't just stop at the invention, but take it to the next level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and while he may have been a little harder to work with when he was at Microsoft, he's a much gentler gentleman these days. But that aside, so we've talked about a lot here today, and like I said, we could talk for hours about this stuff because you're an enormous wealth of knowledge that I would love to just continue to peel away. But there's only so much time in the day that we can extract from you. So I guess to kind of help cap this off, Ranveer, is what are a couple things that you want people to take away from this conversation? What are some of the key nuggets that you want them to really understand as takeaways?
I think one of the things is that, when people think of technology as computer science, and that includes all the buzzwords people hear of late, of the Internet of Things, of AI and quantum compute in the future, it's not just for computer scientists. It's not just for the tech industry, but every industry will change, will adapt, and will look very different 10 years down the line. And a lot of that would be through technology, would be because of the way technology enables new scenarios. And that's one of the takeaways. I think I want people to think in terms of how will technology. It's not just about your emails. It's not just about getting your SharePoint up and running in your company. It's about how your business will get disrupted, or you will be disrupting the business because of all the tech that will be developed, because of artificial intelligence. From a consumer standpoint, I think the future of all of this tech is going to be democratized. It will be embedded into everything we do. Every cup of coffee that we drink will have some tech behind it. Everything will have more AI embedded in everything. Quantum computer make it even things will be even faster. Things we didn't even imagine will start happening. So I think that's the other one. One is for industry people, that whichever industry you are in, be it healthcare, be it medicine, pharma, agriculture, food, retail, logistics, financial services, everything will look very different 10 years down the line because of the way AI, data, computer science, and tech will get embedded into it. So this was for industry people, consumers, and for academics. I'll say that, well, you need to start doing more interdisciplinary work. We are starting to see a little bit of it, that people need to start bringing all of these disciplines together. People in material science working with people in agriculture, working with people in the operations research side, working with computer scientists, and bringing all of this together is what will enable new disciplines. Right now, if I look at the state of research, each of these are silos. You have an association of soil scientists, association of biologists, association of computer science, of electrical engineers. You need to bring all of this together. And this would mean new associations, new consortiums, new conferences, new journals, but that's needed to enable this interdisciplinary research. So there are takeaways I wanted for different categories of people who might be listening to this, different depending on who you are. I think one of the key takeaways is that tech will be driving industry changes, and all of you can contribute to be
Yeah.
part of this.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll take some liberties, and I'll even add one or two here, if you're okay with it, Ranveer.
Yes,
Which is,
definitely. Your thoughts
uh,
are always amazing. Yeah.
I think first and foremost, I think it's the practicality, the approach that Microsoft Research is taking. I think that's a really important message that whether or not you're a Microsoft customer or not, that you should understand the role that Microsoft's trying to play, which is Microsoft's trying to be an inspiration for the industry. We're trying to partner in a material way in your innovation functions, so that there are going to be restrictions on typical companies on how much they can invest in these innovations. Not every company can afford or has the time or ability to go out and do projects like Space Eye, as an example. And so definitely figure out how you can partner with an organization like Microsoft Research in your industry, because stand on the shoulders of giants, and that's how progress gets done. It's not all invented in one place in one corner of the world. It's about cooperation and collaboration. I think that's one of the big messages that I got from you, Ranveer, is that you're not trying to
Mhm.
be the end all be all. You're not trying to be the answer for everything, but it's how can we contribute to our customer success in the innovation space. That's what I'm hearing as a resounding tone. Am I getting that
Yeah,
right?
that's correct, Mike. And the other thing I will add to it is that for people who don't know Microsoft Research, what it is it's an organization of a few hundred, close to 1,000 researchers, PhDs, working in 55 different areas of computer science and EE. And these are all experts in that space. And through this initiative, we are bringing all of them together, and we are tapping into the right expertise for the right problems. And the opportunity here, as Mike said, is to partner, is to work with you to re-envision or just think of what is that future of the industry that we can work together to enable.
I think that's a great place to leave it for today. And I hope you enjoyed our conversation, Ranveer, and I hope I can count on you
Yeah.
coming back to go deeper on some of these other areas. Because again, I'm super interested in this James Bond space
Yeah.
eye. I want to go deeper in that. Talk about communications of the future. All super super cool stuff. So you're always welcome to come back and talk about those industry initiatives.
Yeah. Thanks for having me here, Mike. It was a lot of fun talking to you.
All right. Wow, what a cool episode. Ranveer is always a great guest, really great guy. And I'm so glad had the opportunity to have him on the show. Now, like I said earlier, all the show notes and links that we talked about on today's episode will be out on vnextpod.com. Again, that's vnextpod.com. But also make sure that you support the channel. Make sure you rate and subscribe and all that great stuff. And so, yeah, let's keep the conversation going. If you'd like to provide some feedback, be happy to hear it. Again, go on to the website and provide a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if we should go a different direction, or if there's a particular guest you would like to hear on the show. So with that, everybody, we'll see you next time.